Hey, everybody, and welcome back to the Cinephile. We're so glad you're here. This is week 2 of our 3 Wick Weeks. We're talking about John Wick Chapter 2 from 2017. Jake, you just watched this movie. What are your initial thoughts?
So I liked things about this better than the first John Wick. And then there were some things I liked the original John Wick better. Overall, I think I was more satisfied with this film, shall we say. I think I understood a little bit of the world more. We delved into that. And so I enjoyed that. But there's still some things, that I'm confused about. Maybe I just didn't catch them, but some things that I think could be further explained, further fleshed out. But no, overall, it's good movie. It's very much in the vein of the original, or I should say, the first John Wick.
Mhm.
Um, very high action, high intensity. So yeah, what are your thoughts on it?
I mean, so this movie, in my opinion, is definitely a step up from the first John Wick in many respects. And we'll talk about that when we get to Rosebud and Thorn, because I definitely have some roses, and a couple of buds. But for me, I think when they took the story and they went from a simple revenge story to enveloping and adding this mythos to it that is just fascinating, in my opinion. And so I think also it's grander in scope. Obviously, he goes to Rome at one point in the movie. Um, we meet more characters. So I think they literally just took a lot of the elements from the first John Wick and just elevated them. Uh, just added some caffeine, if you will,
We
to
definitely
to
up the
pretty
ante a
much
little bit.
everything.
It ups
Yeah,
the
yeah.
ante.
And I think, and once you see next week chapter 3, I like it's just that is kind of the goal, I think, of this franchise, is to just kind of up the ante. And even in their box office, which we'll talk about as well, I have some notes written down for that. But yeah, I really enjoyed this movie. I have some notes for the second week. I took notes, um because some of these kills are just hilarious. um
There's a
but
lot of them, a lot of
yeah,
kills. Body
yeah,
count
I
is
think,
high.
um I was listening to somebody talk about the John Wick franchise, and they said it's a fantasy franchise. And I thought that was a very interesting take. And we kind of see that begin with chapter 2, just in adding this kind of idea of the high table, the like the blood oath that John Wick takes, and even the continental, having a continental in Rome, in Italy, and then kind of some of the rules that because they mentioned a couple times in the film. And we talked about this on our first Wick week. I mean, it's John Wick isn't Shakespeare,
Right.
but at the same time, I think the more they add this lore, the more interesting and three-dimensional the story becomes. It's not just a guy getting revenge, except the first part of this movie, and I texted you this. The first part of this movie literally is him finishing the job from the
Yep.
first movie. You thought 2 hours was long enough for him to just kill a bunch of fools and get revenge, but no, no, no. They bring it into the second movie, which I thought was hilarious.
Yeah, for sure.
Okay, well, let's just jump into. I have some box office information that I think is really, really
Yep.
interesting. So we talked in our first Wick week a little bit about how they didn't really advertise this much, and it had a moderate box office take of a total of like 86 million worldwide, which isn't terrible on a $20 million budget. That's okay, something like that. But this opening quite literally doubles almost every single one of these categories. So the opening was at 30.4 million. So it doubled the 14.4 million from the first movie. It ended up with a $92 million domestic haul, which is larger than the whole worldwide total of the first movie, and definitely doubles the domestic of 43 million. And the overseas totaled $171 million, as opposed to the 43 overseas. So this, while we talk about obviously it upping the ante when it comes to action, when it comes to story, it is a franchise that is seeing a positive trajectory just even in its second entry that I think is really important. And there's a reason why now we're going to be seeing John Wick Chapter 4, because, and we'll talk about this next week, that box office increases for Chapter 3 as well. So this franchise is something that people went and saw the first one, was like, you know what, I want to see another one. And that is really important in modern movie making, and that makes sense why they make so many of them, even if the premise is still kind of John Wick just kills everybody.
Yeah, I mean, even a simple premise isn't always a bad premise, and obviously, I mean, with those numbers you pointed out, obviously, we're seeing a positive trend here, and people want to go see these movies, and more people are hearing about them. Obviously, people, I would imagine people that didn't, go out in 2014 and go see the original John Wick in theaters, saw it, rented it, saw it, on a streaming service or
I'm
what have
sure it did
you.
huge VOD business.
Yeah. And now, in that interim period between 2014 and 2017, you've that film's, it's been spread out to more viewers. And now they're like, okay, like I'm in, give me more, right? And so I
Right.
think that that's definitely a trend that's backed up by those box office numbers. And it's interesting because looking into doing a little more research for specifically the second film, when they came back to make two, they decided it was going to be a trilogy. So they made two with having the third already in mind. Um, and so I find that very interesting because I think you tell story differently when you have the third planned already, right? Because movies and stories told generally in what they break down into a 3-act structure, right? And then in that trilogy, a good filmmaker is going to say, okay, I want each of these movies to kind of fulfill one of those 3 acts for this overarching storyline, right? And so you see this with the original Star Wars. You see this with
Right.
the Indiana Jones, the first 3 movies as that trilogy, kind of. And so, Lord of the Rings. How could I forget that? You see it in there as well. And so I definitely I found that interesting because this definitely feels like this movie felt overall like I don't know. I was rooting for John Wick in the first one because like obviously like he wants revenge and like you're made to feel that revenge is justified, through messing up his car and killing his dog. Then it's the symbolic extension, the dog being the symbolic extension of his wife and their relationship.
Right.
Um, Whereas in this movie, I was very conflicted about John Wick as a character. I felt more of him, definitely lean more into the anti-hero side of him because he is the murderer for for this movie, right? He is the one that kind of, I mean, he's fulfilling an oath and he doesn't really want to do it, but he is kind of the bad guy in some of these situations. And so, um, you know, your second act of your story is usually when you see things, kind of take a darker turn, a turn for the worse. And we end this movie with him, running for his life because he's been excommunicated.
Right.
And, it seems like at the end of John Wick 1, you had this feeling of like, oh, he's gonna, he has some peace now. He can go back to his normal life, or at least try to. In this, the ending of chapter 2, he can't go back to his normal life. He's literally running for his life at the end of this
Right.
movie because his world that he tried to escape from that drug him back in has been turned upside down now. It's turned against him. Um, so kind of overcoming that, I think it definitely sets that up for the third act and the third movie of this trilogy.
Well, it's also really funny because he literally talks to the dog and it's like, all right, let's go home. Like, dude, your house was blown up. You have nowhere to go.
Yeah,
And he
exactly.
went there anyway. But you're absolutely right. I mean, the three act structure, that's why trilogies are very popular. And honestly, I don't know if it's just me as a big film fan, but when I get two movies and not three, I kind of feel like there needed to be a third one.
Yeah,
Um, and
because
I,
then it's easier to um I feel like it's easier to be like, well, that the it leaves a sour taste in your mouth. Usually, the second one does. You know, you don't usually make a second one and then it does well, and they don't make a third, right? You know, you only stop at the second one if the second one wasn't it didn't perform, or it wasn't a good story. People weren't into it. You see what I mean?
yeah, no, I absolutely see what you mean. And it's also interesting with John Wick specifically because, as my camera moves, it's also interesting with John Wick specifically because it kind of takes a bit of a left turn.
Mm-hmm.
Um, like I'm a firm believer in the fact that the first John Wick probably was treated as a one-off. And then
Right.
when they saw how successful it is, as my camera keeps moving, when they saw how successful it was, they decided, okay, we're going to do a trilogy. But it's just such a different. This is a different movie because you're
Very much
right. I mean,
so.
it's very much it leans more into the lore. He has this blood oath. He becomes more of a anti-hero.
Mm-hmm.
Like, is he killing? He's killing bad guys, but he's not exactly a great guy.
he's
So
he's very much he's killing bad guys for a badder guy, you know.
like the lesser of two evils.
Yeah, he's killing the lesser of two evils. We get the sense, you know. um uh Santino Santino
D'Antonio.
yeah, thank you, Santino D'Antonio. Like, from the beginning, like, you don't get warm fuzzies about him. Like, you can tell he's a bad guy. And then when John Wick goes to Rome to kill Santino's sister, she reveals like what's gonna happen. You know, Santino's gonna take over her seat at the high table and then try and, take over New York. What he's gonna do with New York, we'll see. Like, it kind of left that kind of, I don't know. It's just that part felt, that was one of the holes for me. It was like, okay, he takes over the her seat at the high table and then is going to take over New York, and I'm like, is someone already in charge of New York? Like, is it like, is he taking literally over like the Continental at the New York in New York, or like I was just I felt like I was that was kind of left as a question that I had. But you definitely, you're set up to believe that, Santino taking over New York is not good. It's not what people
Right.
want. Yeah. So, but John Wick acting as his extension, or his henchman, I should say, to fulfill that blood oath. Um, he's really kind of an extension of the greater of the two evils, right?
Right. Right. And also Santonio D'Antonio is low key just like a major dick too.
Well,
like,
yeah,
like he blew up his house when he said no. And then yeah, he had his sister killed. And then at the end of the movie, when he was just like, he's like, duck fat is amazing. And I was like, John, please just shoot him. Like he kind of was like, I can do what I want now, and I can live in the Continental for years and years because that is a you can't kill me. But I think it also justifies John Wick's actions. The movie does by looking at Winston as well and how he's kind of like trying to strong arm Winston as well. And so seeing that makes us feel a little bit better about John Wick killing him off. And geez, was he annoying.
Oh
But
yeah.
yeah, this is just such a different movie.
Mhm.
And it sets up the excommunicado at the end of this movie where he's running for his life is fascinating because he went from the one attacking others without really them expecting anything to now in the third movie everyone's attacking him instead,
Mhm.
and he has to kind of defend himself. He's not on the offensive anymore, he's on the defensive. And that, I think, that keeps it fresh. That keeps
Mhm.
this idea fresh. I mean, how many movies can you do with a guy just killing a bunch of people? Apparently at
Yeah.
least four.
Apparently. And
um
there are a lot of kills in this one. I felt like there was more than the first John
oh,
Wick.
hands down. And I think there are more in chapter 3 than there are in 2.
Really.
And I would venture to say if that's the case, then in chapter 4 it's going to be like a bloodbath.
Everybody dies.
Yeah, that movie is almost 3 hours long,
Really.
the fourth John Wick.
Wow.
And I was talking to a buddy of mine, Sammy Dub, if you're watching, and he told me if they average a kill a minute, that's like 170 kills.
Honestly, like that seems like a low number for a John Wick movie.
Right, right, right. But I also think it's interesting watching this with you because this isn't necessarily, as the kids would say, your bag.
Yeah.
You know,
My
I would venture
bag.
to say, well,
Pulling out
I
all
would venture
this
to
young
say,
people slang on me.
what?
Young people slang on me.
Slaying.
Slang.
Okay. I was like, why would young people be slaying on
No,
you?
slang is also a young people's slang vernacular term.
Yeah. Yeah. And for the folks at home, if you don't know what slang means, it means you're super laying. You're like really stretched out on the floor. That's slang. Um
And I thought we were going to stay on
anyway,
track for this one.
anyway, welcome to Off the Rails with Jake and Ben.
Oh, goodness.
Uh, Kind of getting into some of the things. So I wrote down some notes of things I really liked about this movie. Um, I like how in the beginning they don't show his face. The opening scene, you don't see John Wick's face, which I think is really cool, and that
I think
adds to
it's,
this.
I think I read like 14 minutes.
That wouldn't surprise me.
Or maybe it's 14 minutes till the credits come in, but it was like over 10 minutes until you see his face, I think.
Yeah, which it gave me echoes of Indiana Jones.
Yeah.
And that setup, we're going to talk about that this year, but
Yeah.
you don't see Indy's face for a hot second
Mhm.
in the first movie in Raiders of the Lost Ark. So it kind of reminded me of that, but that just gives that ominous feeling. I also like how the Russians are moving their whole operation out of town just because John Wick is back. I mean, talk about an alpha. Like you're oh, he's back. Okay, let's move away. Like completely away just for one guy. And because they kept his car
Yeah.
in the collection, which it's just, I mean, his reputation is just insane to be able to do that.
Yeah.
Um, I like it. I can assure you, this is a quote. I can assure you that the stories you've heard about this man have been watered down. I mean, like I said, just building the legend. This really is. It's almost, he's a fantasy character.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, if you look at,
He really is Baba Yaga, the
yeah,
boogeyman, larger than life.
if you look at this movie, he should be dead at least 5 times over.
A hundred
There's a
percent.
point in this movie where he rolls down like a flight and a half of concrete stone stairs.
Yes. Which
Like,
he actually didn't do that stunt. Keanu Reeves did almost all the stunts in this movie, but he didn't do the one down the stairs. And all the times he's hit by a car, he did not do those, which like still
that
removes
makes
that
sense.
like that's still what like 95% of the stunts he did. So like I don't mean that to sound like okay, this is like actually endangering my life. I'll let the professional do it. Um,
Well,
but
and there is a specific scene where he gets hit by a taxi in the beginning of the movie.
mm,
And the way the guy plants his leg, I was like, that could have easily torn an MCL, ACL. And so I kind of was wondering, I mean, we talk about how Keanu Reeves does a lot of his own stunts. It's like, that can't have been Keanu. That just
yeah,
can't, because that's so risky. If the car goes just a little bit faster, a little bit further, I mean, it
yeah,
tears his MCL, ACL. He's out for like a year.
Yeah.
So yeah,
And
I
maybe never
noticed,
comes back the same. So
and yeah, and maybe never comes back the same. But John Wick is unkillable. Um,
even Keanu Reeves has a limit, but John Wick, there is no limit.
there's no limit with John Wick. I also loved in the first part of the movie, he opens the car door and he kills the motorcyclist. Like he clotheslines the motorcyclist with the car door,
Yeah.
which is insane. And he loses. I mean, for a car that he cared about, he killed all those people for. I mean, he beat the shit out of
He
it.
really beat it to hell.
He in the first like 10 minutes. And then John Leguizamo was like, "Yeah, I can have it done. Christmas 2030."
I was okay. I will admit, I understand why the movie ended how it ended, but like I wanted a scene at the end where John Leguizamo just pulls up and be like, "I got it done."
I I kind of wanted a post-credit scene
Yeah,
of John Leguizamo just being like, "How the heck did he
or
bend the
just
chassis like this?"
yeah,
Like it's just like he's like going through, he's trying to fix it, and things keep falling out. He's like, "Oh, come on, man. Really, John? You said you love this car. You killed like a bunch of people for this car, and then you just destroyed it." That was one of the things. Well, we'll get into that with Rosebud and Thorn. The yeah, because I have that written down. He hits a guy with a car. Like I wrote down he bitch slaps a dude with a car, but that's not like. But you know what I mean? Like I
yeah,
couldn't think of, and pardon my French, folks, but I couldn't think of exactly how to describe that other than he hits him like he flings the car around and smacks the dude.
yeah.
And that was also really cool. Um, are there any things that before I continue, because I like I said I took notes. Are there any other things that you thought were really interesting about this?
I guess like things I found interesting. Oh, the when he goes, I really like the sequence when he goes to like when he decides that he's gonna honor the blood oath, and he's going
Mhm.
around. Um he goes to the map guy, and he goes to the sommelier, who was really a gunsmith, and then he goes to the tailor to get a new suit. The tailor is actually the costume designer. It's a cameo.
Really?
Yeah, for the
That's
same
cool.
costume designer for all three of the John Wicks. I didn't look up if he did it for the fourth, but that's the
Oh,
costume
I'm sure
designer.
he did.
Yeah, which is I thought that was I don't know. I find crew cameos fun in the in
No,
like
I agree.
um the most legendary obviously is John Williams finally being in a Star
In
Wars
Star
movie.
Wars movie, even
Uh,
though the Star Wars movie he was in
was the worst one.
was the worst one.
Um,
Um,
but anyways, and then really that kind of that gearing up sequence, right, with the map guy, the sommelier, and the tailor was maybe my favorite part of the movie. Like I don't know, just something about like the we got. I feel like that just like gave us so many clues into like how this culture operates and how John Wick like goes about his business, right? How he does his job.
yeah,
His job is very gruesome and badass, but like you know, seeing the inside workings of that. And you'll notice that I noticed the clearest shot I think in the movies on the sommelier. Um, but I read that some other characters wear it too, and you can kind of see them. They wear these like pins or like medals, and
hmm.
actually, those are World War II relics that they put a skull over the swastika. They're literal German like
I mean,
surplus medals.
I mean, there are plenty of those medals out there. So
Yes,
that yeah,
but
interesting.
it was some special like anti-partisan medal that the Nazis gave out to soldiers. But and so they're like, well, we got to get rid of the swastika, so they put a skull over it.
And I agree with you. One of my favorite sequences is when he's asking about, okay, like, do you need like an evening wear and
Yeah,
like a dinner jacket? And even the sommelier just suggesting is like, what about dessert? And
yeah,
I mean, just like the lingo. And I
yeah.
mentioned that this past Wick week for
Mm-hmm.
John Wick Chapter 1 or John Wick. Um, but some of the lingo is just so insane. It just is just legendary.
Mm-hmm.
I liked that when we see the costume designer, they're designing this suit. One, I liked watching that, but two, that they had a certain kind of Kevlar like fabric
Mm-hmm.
that they put into the suit. So instead of having like a superhero costume, John Wick just has like a bulletproof suit,
Yeah.
which is so awesome.
Which where can I get one of those? Not that I need it. It just that would feel really cool.
There are a couple of times where he's getting shot at that he kind of Dracula's and goes like
Yeah.
this with his jacket and to kind of provide like this shielding. And that honestly is incredibly creative. I thought that
Mm-hmm.
was incredibly creative, that idea that it's a bulletproof dinner jacket.
Yeah. And I think like, they knew they were gonna put John Wick in a lot of peril. Um, and I think they were just kind of like, well, how can we make sure he doesn't die? Like, or how can we make sure like he believably is surviving all this? And they're like, oh, bulletproof suit. I like it.
Yeah, and I think I mean, it
It
makes sense.
works. I mean, I don't know a lot about this universe or the high table or what all these people do, but it makes sense that they would be the ones that know how to make a bulletproof suit.
Yeah, yeah, it does. And it makes sense that they'd be the ones that said you can only pay for it with a gold coin.
Exactly.
There are a few more things that I kind of wanted to mention before we go into our rosebud and thorn. If I can pull up my notes that disappeared. It's amazing. My camera acts up. My notes are disappearing. Society is rigged.
Watch out, Bobby Yeager's gonna burst through the door.
John Wick is doing this to me. So,
And I hear you talking about my movie.
did you like it or not?
If anything, he's gonna bust through
It
that
was
door and
excellent.
like he's gonna bust through my door and be like, "Why don't you like it more?"
uh, John Wick doesn't have a name for his dog, which is legendary. He just calls him boy. He's like, "Come here, boy."
Yeah.
And he's like, "We're going home." And Lance Reddick's like, "Is there a name for your dog?" And he goes, "No." I thought that was really funny.
In a way, it reminded me of this is a John Wayne movie from I believe it's from the 50s called Hondo with Geraldine Page, and John Wayne is a cavalry scout, and he has like this border collie that follows him all the time, and he just calls it dog the whole movie. I think in Big Jake, another one from the 70s, he has a dog.
That's
He just
another
calls
John
him,
Wayne.
yes, another John Wayne movie. I have a one-track mind, if you can't
Yeah,
tell by
no kidding.
that guy over there. But also has a dog that he just calls dog. So I liked that detail for perhaps obvious reasons. Hi, friends. So, a little editorial note here. Take a break in the episode. That conversation we just had about John Wayne's dog in Hondo and Big Jake. I went back and looked it up. In Hondo, the dog does have a name. I got it wrong. The dog's name is Sam. So this guy right here, this dum dum, yeah, he was wrong. Don't listen to him. Told you a lie. People make mistakes. People are dumb sometimes. I was dumb. I own my dumbness. So just had to come on here and make it right. And back to regularly scheduled programming.
Yes, no, I thought that was really funny. And I love dogs, so I love seeing dogs in there. These aren't, and we're going to talk about favorite kill. These aren't favorite kills, but these are a couple of things I kind of noticed. There's a time where he's in the catacombs in Rome and he runs out of ammo, so he pins the guy to a wall, reloads it, and then shoots him point blank. So he's like pin him to the wall, reloads it, and shoots him. I was like, this dude is so extra. And then there's another time where he's reloading, and this guy pops out. He pulls out a pistol, shoots him, puts it back, and continues to reload, which is so smooth. I thought those were great. I also liked that chick had the gun in the violin.
Yeah.
And she pulled it from the violin and tried to shoot him. And finally, some advice advice for everybody at home. Don't ever try and call John Wick because he will just hang up on you if he's just not having it. Okay, now we've come to Rosebud and Thorn. Jake, do you have a Rosebud and Thorn for this movie?
So starting with rose, I actually have two roses. One is going to go to lighting slash color. Um, I think that's something that they did well in the first John Wick movie, but I felt like it was all the more so in this one, right? It was from the first frame, it is lit beautifully, and the colors are just rich and vibrant and really inviting and visually interesting, right? I thought, they didn't rely on, necessarily the cinematography or, the action to keep you visually interested. They made this look beautiful as well, which I really commend them on. My second road, and my second rose is going to go to Ian McShane, his character of Winston. I really like that character. He's just like, first of all, I like Ian McShane anyway. It's just like his voice, one of the best, I think.
Oh
Um,
yeah.
and then just like his like wise sage, like he's definitely like kind of the guidance, John Wick's guidance in this universe, I feel like. Um, he's the one, kind of helping John one remember the rules, but also like know ways around them and kind of guide him on his path. Um,
Yeah.
but also he's very like smooth and charismatic at the same time. It's not a father figure. It's very like everything just comes so simply to him. Everything is just so obvious. He's very wise, I feel like, and so I really
Yes.
like that character. My bud for I said this on the first John Wick, and I'm going to say it again. My bud is the story. I felt like the story got better.
Okay.
The story got better, but there are still holes. I pointed out the one of what makes um, what makes Santino. Good God, what makes Santino the bat?
Parmigiano Reggiano. I
All
mean,
right,
that is the
now,
most stereotypical
yes,
Italian name.
yeah,
Santino D'Antonio.
Antonio. What makes Santino the ultimate bad guy, or I shouldn't say the ultimate. What makes Santino the overarching bad guy here, right? Why why are we afraid of him taking over New York more than we should be afraid of anyone else taking over New York, right? I feel like
Hmm.
they just expect you, because this movie is called John Wick, to assume that okay, John Wick is the good guy, which he's our protagonist. That good guy, yeah, sure, we'll call him good guy, with some reservation. Um, but is he still the good guy when he's working for Santino? Right? When he's going
Right.
to kill his sister, is he still the good guy? And so I felt like that was um, something that I would have liked to see explained more. Um, and really, I just want more of the universe. I wish we had a character like that existed outside of this universe that was like his side, that was John Wick's sidekick or whatever, or someone that kept getting drug
Okay.
along
Yeah.
as a story reason to have to explain things, right? I don't want them to just sit like, I want it to make sense for the story, and for all these characters, like it doesn't make sense that we would have to sit down and explain how this universe works and the rules and the connections and blah blah blah. But I feel like that's leaving a hole in the story, right? Of course, I would relate this back to Star Wars, but Luke is such the perfect protagonist for that movie because he's so naive to so much about the universe in terms of the rebellion, empire, Jedi, how the force works and everything. And so he is our point of access as the audience, right, to that story. And that's how we learn things, is as Luke's learning those things. In these first two movies, there's no point of access that's on the same level, I guess you could say, of knowledge of this universe as us as the audience, right? There are times that John gets reminded of the rules, and that's how we learn them. He gets reminded of things. We see things play out, and you kind of piece things together in your mind. But I don't know. I feel like there's that piece missing. There are things that are missing that I'm not understanding that perhaps are influencing characters' decisions. And then my thorn for this one is gonna be the gore. And I know I'm gonna sound like a wuss saying the gore, but I felt there are more
You do.
kills. There are more more kills in this movie than the first John Wick, and the kills aren't what bother me. I just felt like this took like a I felt like we showed more of like the gory violence. The violence doesn't bother me. The body count doesn't bother me. It's the pulling pencils out of people's ears that
I knew
bothers
you were
me.
gonna
And
say
like
that too. I
seeing
knew
that
it.
in like seeing that in like a medium close up. Like that's I
Yeah,
don't know.
that's a little
To
much.
me, there's a line, and it kind of flirted. It flirted with it. I think it crossed it a few times.
Yeah,
Um,
yeah, that was a little much.
so I don't know. I felt like they were able to balance violence and gore, the line between the two in the first one, and I felt like that's something that bothered me this time. So that is my
Yeah.
thorn.
Okay. Yeah, no, that totally makes sense. Kind of talking about what you talked about, especially for your rose. I have I guess three roses. The cinematography in this movie is excellent. And it one of the things that I heard somebody talk about when they talked about John Wick is it lets the action breathe.
Mm-hmm.
When we had the John or Jason Bourne movies, right, it was a lot of shaky cam and quick cuts to make it seem like harder hits almost. And that Paul Greengrass, the director of a few of those movies, kind of created that.
Mm-hmm.
Um, so I think the cinematography is unique and really highlights all of the skill that Keanu Reeves has when it comes to
Mm-hmm.
stunt coordination and fighting and things like that. And the director, Chad Stahelski. Um, the lighting in this movie as well, I agree with. It's it's a little like neo noir, and I just it adds a vibrance to it
Mm-hmm.
and just makes it really interesting. It's kind of fun to watch. It doesn't, I don't know if that also adds to it kind of being fresh,
Mm-hmm.
but it definitely makes it a lot more interesting visually to watch
Yeah.
him punch a bunch of guys.
I think
Last,
if I
oh,
can interject here,
yeah, no ahead.
I think it creates this juxtaposition between the visual image and our story, right? It's got a lot of death in it. It's a you could say that that inherently makes it a darker story. And then
Mm,
even looking in comparison to the first one, it is a darker story in a bit than the first John Wick movie. So taking that thematically darkness and juxtaposing that with beautiful lighting and beautiful color, I think is a really interesting and I think a very welcome artistic choice.
and you're absolutely right. And it isn't just the lighting, it's also the color. The
Yeah.
color in this movie is intentional, and I definitely like that. The last thing is the location team. Whoever scouted for locations for this movie did an excellent job. The Rome stuff was great, but I just kept noticing that the set pieces, whether they were locations that were picked out or they designed them themselves and built them, the set design in this
Mm-hmm.
movie is spectacular.
I
I
agree.
really liked it.
I
And
would agree.
yeah, it's just different.
Mm-hmm.
Like there's a kind of a wider shot and it kind of pulls in from when they're doing this kind of coronation for the
Yeah.
sister in Rome. And it kind of reminded me a little bit of Mission Impossible Fallout, but I obviously had the lighting, had the color, the red and the blue, but it just was such a visually interesting place. And as somebody that studied Latin for 7 years and loves Rome and Roman culture and Greek culture, studying like ancient versions of that, I found it really, really interesting and compelling to see.
It almost has like a James Bond quality to it, you know? Like
Yes, yes.
this whole movie has almost a little James Bond. Like
It like
take
takes James Bond, but if it focuses more on not the espionage, but the assassin.
Yeah.
Like
Yeah.
there's not as much espionage as
Hmm.
a Mission Impossible or a James Bond. There's definitely more, it's hyper violence.
Hmm.
Um, where you don't get that with a James Bond, or you get that maybe just a smidge with Mission Impossible, but not really there either. So
Hmm.
it's almost like the opposite of the coin,
Right.
which I think sets it apart.
Hmm. For sure.
Um, I would say that my bud is the car continuity errors. I had some issues
Mm,
with that car should not have been drivable
correct.
at all. And so the car continuity errors for me took me out of the movie just a little bit, especially in the beginning. And so I had an issue with that. I think I don't necessarily have a thorn. Um, but to kind of go off of what you were saying for your thorn, they ask you to suspend disbelief a lot,
Hmm.
which obviously makes sense. This is a fantasy film, but they really do ask you to suspend disbelief a lot. And so I can see where that can be a thorn. I also, wanting more of this story and this lore, the thing I'd ask, I guess, is maybe more of a question, is do you think some of the appeal and why people want to come back is to get just a little piece, another piece of the puzzle, and that makes it interesting? Because this really doesn't spoon feed anything. It's a
Right.
lot of, you have to figure it out yourself, and it's the mystery of it, which I think a lot of modern films answer everything for you.
Hmm.
And it's not like a Back to the Future where it's a full circle kind of film. They just answer all of the lore questions for you. And I think by not doing that, that makes it, one, a little bit more unpredictable, two, more interesting, and three, gives you more of a desire to come back and, one, watch the movie again. Like, I enjoyed rewatching this movie because I kind of know what happens in the third one and remember the first one. But on rewatch, it makes it, you can pick even more things out. So I
Yeah.
think maybe that could be a reason why they choose not to dive into lore
Hmm.
as much as they do, but they definitely, it is a lived in universe.
100%. Yeah.
They 100% expect you to, and I kind of like that, where they don't really tell you anything. But, and I mentioned this in the first Wick week, but he just knows guys, just says, hey, they know him. He somehow knows Common, who
Yeah.
is because it's Common and Ruby Rose.
Yeah.
He somehow knows Common, and they've maybe fought before, maybe they worked together before. We don't know,
Yeah.
and I think it's the not knowing that
Hmm.
makes it interesting. It's like when you're a dog and you're chasing a car. It's really exciting when you're chasing that car, but once you get that car, you have a car. What are you going to do with it? You can't drive.
Gonna call
And
John
this
Wick
isn't
so
the
we can
Cars
come wreck
universe.
it.
The cars don't drive themselves,
Oh,
right?
mercy.
And your owner isn't Elon Musk. He doesn't like, he hasn't come up with, you know, some sort of device that allows a dog to drive. Could you imagine a dog driving a car? Good Lord.
Elon probably has.
I mean, honestly, I want Elon to invent that thing from Up where the dog can speak, because Anne Marie, my sister, has a dog named Dozer, and he will not shut up sometimes. Like when he's in his kennel, because she has to leave to go to work, and he just, oh, and I'm sitting there, and I'm like, Bud, shut up. I'm like, come on, dude. And I
Uh,
said, and I told him, I talk straight to dogs. I'm like, look, the more you whine, the less I'm gonna want to let you out. And he's a German Shepherd. I don't know how smart German Shepherds are. I know Huskies are very smart. I love
German
Huskies.
Shepherds are pretty smart, I think.
Well, he's not smart enough to figure out to shut up. But that is a tangent. I love dogs though. I really do love dogs. Um, but I think also a question you brought up, what makes John Wick the good guy?
Mhm.
I think it's his heart. They do a good job of showing, especially in the first movie, that he does have a heart.
Oh, I
That he
agree in
doesn't
the first
necessarily,
movie. I agree in the first movie that he's the good guy. I agree that makes sense there. This movie is why I question. I guess I don't question if is he still the good guy.
Yeah, I think potentially maybe they're relying a little bit on us having seen the first film and remembering that to try and kind of stretch uh that idea of him having a heart through two movies.
Yeah.
But that is something that I definitely thought of as like, okay, what makes him the good guy? I guess his conscience, but also at the same time, like he kills a bunch of people. So,
Mm-hmm.
he's very much an anti-hero,
Yeah.
which makes him interesting to watch. Now we move on to our favorite kill. And Jake, I'm curious as to see what your favorite kill of this movie was. You already talked about how you didn't like the gore, but
Yeah.
what was your favorite kill?
My favorite kill is when he kills Cassian, Common's character. Um, I that is my favorite kill, not because of the kill itself, but because it's the culmination of this relationship that they pick up on, you know, during the
Right.
movie when they run into each other. They pick up obviously this prior relationship, and then to see how that simmers and builds until their fight and Common's death. Um, I picked that one because I feel like so many of these kills, like we don't know these people
Right.
that he's killing, and so that one stood out to me because it was different. And the fact that obviously they can't kill each other when they get to the Continental, so they sit down and have a drink together.
That I liked
That
that. Yeah.
that was really like their
And they knew each
relationship.
other's drink.
Yeah,
They knew
that
each other's drink. So that just adds to the like there's obviously this backstory that we're never gonna get.
yeah.
Yeah.
And then and it's like the fact that they told each other, and you could say, you could make the argument that, oh, they were being facetious when they said this, but I take their words at face value, and that when they were going to kill each other, they were going to try and do it as quickly and compassionately as possible.
Oh no, I took that face value too.
I take that as face value just because like it's this whole idea of like they don't want to be doing this, and I think Common's character knows that John Wick doesn't want to be doing this, but because they both understand this universe and the rules,
Yeah.
those larger forces, those set pieces have kind of forced them into this situation where they're going to have to, one of them's going to have to kill the other one.
It's not a crime of passion.
No,
It's like clearly business.
yeah,
And I
it's
think they both understand that. And that's why they talk the way they do, because
mm-hmm.
it's not I'm not trying to make you mad. I'm like, this is my job. Even though the one question I'd be like, okay, if I'm Common, my boss is dead. But I guess it'd be the integrity of the fact that I lost my boss,
Mm-hmm. Yeah,
that I failed, that then I want to get my reputation back by killing the Baba Yaga. I guess that
yeah.
would be it. I just answered my own question. Incredible. For me, my favorite kill, you already mentioned it. It was when he killed the two guys with a pencil.
It just that made
Like,
me uncomfortable.
it was so legendary. The one he stabs in the Adam's apple, then he pulls it out. Somehow that guy just gets back up again.
Yeah.
Then he takes the other one, stabs that guy in the neck. Okay, he's dead. Then he takes the first guy, shoves him to the side, takes the pencil, pushes it through his ear,
Yeah.
and kills him. And that is a callback to in the first movie where they talked about how he killed three guys in a bar with a pencil.
Yeah.
But I also wrote down that that pencil must have been a Ticonderoga, because that sucker did not break. And I don't know how. I don't know how the pencil didn't break. You shoved it through his skull. Here you go, the
Built
Ticonderoga.
different. Built different.
I was like looking if I have a pencil somewhere.
As
I
Lee
do not.
Corso would say, not so fast, my friend. And that man always has, on College Game, he always has a Ticonderoga pencil because that man, he owns stock in Ticonderoga, so he shows it off.
I mean, I always use the Sharpie S gel. That is my all-time favorite pen. I like the point .5. Now we're getting into a completely different discussion. The point .5, I like the point .5, but I also use the point .7. So that has nothing to do with anything I just said.
I'm gonna
But
do a QVC show near you.
yeah. And today we are going to be talking about the Sharpie S Gel pen. How many people can you kill with a Sharpie S Gel pen? Sharpie, permanent,
In more
permanence.
ways than one.
Yeah, Sharpie, permanent in more ways than one. So that
Oh
was definitely
shit.
my favorite kill. I think overall, if we're going into final thoughts, I like this movie more than the first. I think it's wildly entertaining. The cinematography, and I'm a sucker for, and you are too,
Mm.
a sucker for good cinematography. The lighting specifically, it is noticeable. I really liked that, and I really like I like on location shooting. As much as I appreciate the Mandalorian and the volume and what they did with that, the more physical on set, it almost is like there was a time like original Star Wars. Let's talk about it in terms of Star Wars. The first Star Wars, there wasn't much CGI. So they used a lot of puppets and a lot of different masks and things like that. But then by the time the prequels came along, there was enough development in CGI that George Lucas wanted to use that. And episodes 2 and 3 were shot almost entirely on blue screen.
Mm-hmm.
So then you get to the new trilogy, and they kind of have a good mix of practical, and then they kind of advance the practical effects with a little bit of CGI.
Mm-hmm.
I think we're at a point now where we may be in that all CGI kind of phase, but with the volume.
Mm-hmm.
For instance, Ant-Man and the Wasp, and that's not a word. Ant-Man and the Wasp: Quantumania is shot almost entirely on the volume. And I think that it's just not developed enough that you can have a whole movie on that and not
Yeah.
make it feel like it's just green screen the whole
It
time.
There is something inherent about nature, be that our physical being or the world around us, that is imperfect, that a computer cannot replicate.
Right.
And I think
Right.
if things that are entirely shot on green screen, the volume, blue screen, what have you, things that are entirely digital, they're too perfect. They don't feel, I think that's what makes them
Lived
feel,
in. They don't feel lived
yeah.
in.
Mm-hmm.
And I
This
guess that's
this
why
this
the
isn't
prequels
perfect.
works.
Granted, I made this 2 minutes before we shot this, but the way this bed is imperfect.
It's incredibly
It's
imperfect.
lived.
Look at that. There are no hospital corners.
It's
My
lived
grandma's
in.
rolling in her grave.
Ah,
I love
sorry,
my grandma.
Ben's grandma.
Marcia taught me how to that's my grandmother. She taught me how to make my bed, and I still fold military corners and fold them tight because I don't like to be tucked in. That's weird. Like in the movie Elf, where he's like, tuck me in. He's like
No.
shoving them. That's weird. But I do like to know that my sheets aren't going anywhere. As opposed to Daniel, shout out Daniel, who when we were in our dorm room, Daniel never makes his bed. So he will just kind of that day grab the sheets, kind of do this a little bit, slide in, and he's good. It's very much and he's an Eagle Scout like I am. That's like when you have a sleeping bag, and he kind of takes that sleeping bag mentality, sleeping bag mentality. We're slap happy over
Oh
here.
dear.
But no, this I really enjoyed this movie. I do think there are some things they should improve on, but there are also things that I don't know if they even can when it comes to car continuity, things like that. You
No.
don't have a bunch of 1970s muscle cars that you can just destroy. So
Right.
I kind of understand that a little bit, but
Yeah.
overall, I really liked it. Jake, what did you think?
I I don't know if I can say I liked it more or less than the first one because I felt like it's different. It's just different. I will say this set me up for the next one. I want to see where this goes because I feel like this story is unresolved. I want to see how it ends. Um, for all the gripes and qualms I have, the story shortcomings that I have issue with, it still makes me want to come back for the end. And so I will say it's a success in that way. And obviously, like this is still a John Wick movie, so the fights are all incredible. it succeeds there 100%. I like what you pointed out about how the cinematography lets it breathe. I agree with that. And you can really appreciate that lets you really appreciate the craft of these actors and these stuntmen and the stunt coordinators and the people who planned and choreographed this all out and the people who captured it all on camera and made it look so good together. As someone who is behind the camera, I always enjoy a movie that allows me to appreciate the craft, and I feel like this does so there. And so yeah, I'm interested to see the culmination and where John Wick runs to, if we will.
Oh, absolutely. Absolutely. And you'll love chapter 3, Parabellum. But the question is for all of you folks, did you like this movie? Did you not? Let us know your thoughts in the comments down below. And get ready for next week. We're doing John Wick chapter 3, Parabellum. And we are excited to do that. And our final Wick week before Jake and I go see John Wick chapter 4. But for Jake Biller, I'm Ben Sparrow. Thanks so much for watching. We'll catch you next time. Like and subscribe, by the way. And cut.